We were told actually that you would be incredibly bored if this was too academic and talking too much. So please keep it interactive. Ask questions if you want at any point in time. Let's try to have it a bit engaging like that. So quick introduction. Name Magnus Gorder. I am one of the co-founders of a new VC fund called Portugal Ventures, which is focused on really around sort of bringing Nordic technology companies through international expansion. So what does that mean in terms of sectors and stages? Well, Series A, Series B, mainly, more B2B tech focused. And it's really hitting on a sore point in the Nordic where it's missing capital, smart capital in that stage, where the point is really bringing value, like was talked about before, above and beyond just the capital. That's something actually to think about really in this day and age where there's so many funds popping up. Make sure you find that fund that really knows your business and understands how to add value to that particular, in your particular business model and sector, that they can introduce new customers, partners, etc. to your business. Making sure you help it grow in other ways than just capital. So anyways, that's what we're doing. Let's just quick on that. So what I'm going to do here is this. Do we switch this? So this is, yeah, and then that's forward. So basically, what I'm going to do is just try to give you a little bit of insight into how we think as a Series A VC, what we look for when we're diving into new companies, doing research on those businesses, and hopefully, help you, equip you a little bit to better deal with those Series A rounds when you're trying to fundraise for your business. How many people here are doing their Series A, upcoming Series A? Anyone? You? Okay, 3. Good. It's majority. So jumping in here quickly, just first on the venture capital lifecycle. Obviously, first spend a lot of time sourcing. We looked at 2,000 to 3,000 companies per year. I should mention, by the way, that I was before Portugal Ventures, I was heading out the investment initiatives of a fund called Nauta Capital, which was Barcelona-based, and I was sitting in London doing their North European investment, heading out the investment practice. Due diligence, we're diving into the company in all different ways. We'll talk a bit more about this later and what's important to focus on. Obviously, coming the investment, we're trying to add a lot of value to the business that we discussed. Looking at strategic M&A if necessary, helping the company prepare for an exit or for future funding rounds, and then going towards the exit itself. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. Just want to mention, when you're reaching out to investors, don't be worried about going in cold and actually just getting in touch over email. Because most funds, even the biggest funds, they do appreciate that the investors get in touch directly. So actually inbound from entrepreneurs is huge for us. So don't think that you do need a warm intro from someone for it to make sense for you to reach out to a fund. It's not necessary. We do spend a lot of time on events, pitching competitions, judging, holding talks, etc. to try to market ourselves. Just like you guys, it's important with visibility. We do get referrals from other portfolio companies, friends of the fund, etc. So that's always good if you know someone that knows the fund. Use that, why not? Universities, the technology transfer offices at universities is a good source of new companies for us. It's very early stage, so we get to know them, like was discussed before they're ready for their Series A. And eventually we also have a team that spends time doing outbound. So you actually see companies way before they're ready for Series A. And no matter how big your fund becomes, and no matter how famous I guess it is, you still should have a small team that spends time on this outbound piece to really find those diamonds before they're found by other funds. So here, I'm not going to talk in detail about these. I just want to show you how we think and how the process is at Series A. So we talked about the sourcing, this is the investment process. We will then have a meeting where it's just an intro meeting. It might be a partner or a mid-level investment manager that meets, talk a little bit about just a general management presentation. Then we're looking into things such as the cap table. We spoke about this before, making sure there are no red flags on the cap table. We look at the top level growth numbers, and then create a one-pager which we share internally so all partners can have a say or sort of share with us if this is something they have particular expertise in and what they think about the expansion possibilities, etc. of those businesses. Then we go into deeper analysis, and I'll talk a little bit about what you should prepare later. And here we actually have a particular presentation or a structure that we'd like you to present to the overall partnership. So this is just so each partner within our fund has the chance to vote in the investment committee, so they all understand your business a little bit. So we have a structure that we recommend, and then you present to the partnership as a whole. Then term sheet negotiations, we're talking about the different terms, etc. I think someone else will speak about one of the other days about different terms that are important. We share an investment memorandum internally with a strategy, and then we go to third-party legal, which is just check third-party DD, which is legal, financial, commercial, just sort of making sure that there's no other red flags. And then finally, the check, which is the exciting part. So, in terms of documents, you should probably prepare before you're talking to your Series A investors some of the important stuff to have done. Obviously, the first is a given. I'm going to speak a little bit about what's needed to have in the investor deck. In terms of the financial models, make sure you have that cap table detailed out, understanding how the share register looks today, how much capital has been invested to date as a measure of capital efficiency, and typically in terms of revenue, going back 1 year and looking at month to month, 1 year forward is important for us, and other metrics that are KPIs in your business. And the bottom part here is understanding, really, that 1 year forward revenue that you have, is that just sort of kind of guesswork that you've done? Or is it do you properly look at, actually, these are the customers that we have today, this is how many people are churning, or how many of them are churning, and going forward, applying some of those analytics to that, this is how we're backing up that future forecast. We actually want to understand that there's thinking behind it, and that you actually make sure that you have some kind of data to back that up. So in terms of B2B SaaS businesses, we look at, rolling contracts, how much of that 1 year forward is actually contracts you already have, how many need to roll over and re-sign, and how many are actually new contracts. So going into that detail is something that we do. Quickly talking a little bit about the investor presentation. What I'm trying to do here, by the way, in these slides, is I get questions. There's certain themes that come back that I get questions around. So I'm just trying to hit on some of those things. And one of the things we do get questions on, sort of, what do you want in the presentation? And I'm just going to mention a few key things that I think are important to include, and that I think a lot of entrepreneurs actually might get a little bit wrong. So, obviously starting out with an executive summary, defining the problem, and what is your solution? And here, there's one thing I want to say that maybe slips a little bit, or that many entrepreneurs could do better. If you, going into that meeting, you assume that the investors know and understand your business quite well, is a mistake. Usually, you should explain it as if the person doesn't know almost anything. I mean, this is in the first meeting. And again, because you're probably sitting on all these amazing ideas about all these use cases and all the features that are coming, and you have all these great ideas in your head, which is fantastic. However, when you go into that meeting with the investor, make sure it's very clear and concise. You're not talking about many different use cases. You have a focus on certain target areas, certain target customers, and you're really making sure that it comes across as a very clear vision, and that it's not difficult to understand what the product is and what it's solving. It's actually a mistake you think shouldn't happen often, but it happens all the time, just because they have it all in their head and they don't think that we're coming in blank. In terms of the market, I actually agree a lot with what Steven was saying before, but also think that for it to make sense, it has to be able to grow to a certain size, which is why we look at the total addressable market, going bottom up, top down. We do that analysis ourselves as well. Differentiation, again here, this is another thing that's not done so often. We'd actually like to see specifics on what is feature-wise, and now I'm talking particularly about the tech companies, I'm sorry that it's slightly different, but specifically, what do you do that's better compared to the other guys? Where are the real barriers and what's different? Revenue model, of course, important. We talked about the customers before. Financials, same thing that was mentioned before. Understanding. Here you don't have to go all the way down. It's revenue, split down in recurring and non-recurring pieces, if that's applicable to your business. Then it is the gross profit margins, understanding, in terms of what's in cost of goods sold and what are the margins looking like. That's That's really the important part here. And then the cap table, of course, that we spoke about. In terms of the raise, what's the capital need of the business? As investors, but also as entrepreneurs, one thing that we have learned is that things always takes longer than you think. I mean, literally, having made this mistake tons of times myself before, it's very hard to judge how long it's going to take a business to reach certain milestones. It usually takes longer than you think, and what does that mean? You need more capital. So actually here, how much have you raised to get to where you are today? And we'll look at that as a proxy for how much you need going forward, and then how much capital is needed to break even. We need to judge this because it's important for us in terms of our dilution and how much we need to contribute later. And then finally, some exit considerations. Have you thought about this? And going back, and I made it a circle because finish off with an executive summary makes sense, just to hit on the key points. So, wanted to address here sort of what are we looking for when we're talking to entrepreneurs. And the first thing has become a complete cliche. It doesn't make it any less true, though. Actually, people and culture beat strategy at the early stage level. It's always the case that we look at people first. In some cases, we spoke about this at the dinner, you have these brilliant people with a great idea, and then a couple of years later, they realized actually the need for that particular product wasn't that big, and they turned it around and they came up with something completely different, using maybe the same technology or platform, but then ending up with something different. And again, only exceptional teams with the right characteristics are able to navigate that kind of landscape and that kind of turbulence and stick to it. So I'm going to dive in quickly here on the team characteristics, because this is another thing people ask. What do you mean by team? I mean, what do you mean by what's important with people? It's a combination of psychology and of research science, doing reference checks and looking at their backgrounds. In terms of personality, in terms of the people that are going to lead the other people in the business, we're looking for, of course, first and foremost, high level of integrity. I mean, this is something that I would never compromise on. It can actually break a lot of businesses if you don't have the right kind of integrity with the team. So it's absolutely key. We're looking at things like persistence, though. We're looking at the ability to create passion and to attract good talents in your company. So these kind of leadership charisma characteristics is very important for us in certain positions. But then it's okay to have, we've had cases a lot where we go in quite early, where we have brilliant technologists, but they might not be the best people to lead the business as a CEO, for instance. Then actually it happens that we take in our own management team that we suggest, and then you work together that way. Of course, domain knowledge, really understanding your space is important. We do look at what you've done before. Are you a serial entrepreneur? Do you have different, it goes down to track record as well. Do you have a lot of previous entrepreneurship experience? How's the team that you built around you? And we do look at references, speak to other people that you worked with before. And network to build the right kind of mentors, advisory board, raising capital, things that we also help you. We do look at that too. Sector and stage, it was mentioned before that you should educate yourself about the investors you talk to. So before you're jumping into a particular, talking to a particular VC, make sure that you check that actually these guys really understand my space. They built B2B companies before. They understand life science. They really get my business, and they get how to add value. So that's just really what this point is about. Disruption. For us, this is also becoming a bit of a cliche buzzword, but again, we're trying to look for companies, particularly for us though, trying to look for companies that have real disruptive impact on areas or markets that have not yet been that disrupted by technology. An example is Be My Eye, which was actually an originally Italian company that we invested in, which is a market research company. So what they do is, the old market research, the Nielsens of the world, they spend weeks collecting data, and it's incredibly expensive. So instead Be My Eye does, they have a platform where the likes of you and I can bring up our phone, and we see a bunch of jobs around on the map, and Coca-Cola, let's say Coca-Cola, it's one of the customers, have posted this job. And so I can run around, do price checking, mystery shopping, etc., easily verified with the phone. So within just an hour, they have thousands of data points surrounding the shops. And Amazon is an example of a customer, right? They want they want to make sure that you have the cheapest products. So, people are running around doing this. So at a fraction of the price, in just 1 to 2 hours, they have all this data points. So again, just a mention of something really disruptive that's changing the way market research is done. Growth, partially mentioned before, because of how, this is different, by the way, from angel investors to VCs. It's a little important to understand the VC mindset. For us, it's actually key that each company has the potential to grow to a significant size within a limited time period. There is the case that there's quite a heavy write-off in the VC industry, so we just got to make sure that those wins make up for all the losses in the portfolio. Now again, particularly for us, and we've spoken a lot about this actually in these days, but for us, we're in Europe, and particularly for us, we have to find ways to lower that write-off rate and maybe not hit the Facebooks and WhatsApp, but have maybe not so many 40, 50x, but having many more 4 to 5x and lower write-off rates. So again, in Europe, this is different from the US. Barriers to entry in B2B, we're looking at things like IP, patents. We've had cases here, by the way, at Nauta, where we've actually sold non-core patents at a company for more than we acquired a company for originally. So again, here, there's a lot of value that can be built there. And many times, I think, have these conversations with entrepreneurs, they come and say, yeah, but we didn't want to really spend the money and the time on it, it's expensive. What's really expensive is a couple of years down the line when you didn't do that, and your product is a great success, and someone just copies it. Let's say you had amazing, some kind of proprietary algorithms that did machine learning in a new, smart way. Say you hadn't protected it in any way. That's a real risk. So it doesn't have to be in deep R&D. There could be all kinds of other ways to protect your company and your product. That's just one example. Around timing, we want to make sure that there's two sides to this one. One thing is that the product is ready for scale. So don't actually try to, at least in my experience, don't try to go to a lot of different markets immediately. Going to the US before your company is ready to expand in the US can be one of the quickest ways to hit a nail in the coffin. I don't know if that's even an English expression, we do have it in Norway. Before it's ready for it. It does not make sense. You have to be ready from a product standpoint, a team standpoint, a resource standpoint, in terms of capital. So, and the other side is that the market is ready for your product. I mean, we all know that IoT has been around for ages. It's not a new concept at all. Apple didn't have the first iPhone. I mean, in Norway, we invested in a company before they launched the iPhone. That was called, I think it was called Magphone. It has nothing to do with mining, maybe Magnus, but it was way too early. People weren't ready for it. So again, timing here is something we do look at in both those camps. Sustainability was spoken about before. Sustainability is two things: financial sustainability and societal sustainability. For us, it is important with both, and we actually spoken about this a little bit. And I think that you were spot on what was said before here about more and more investors, and actually our investors as well, the LPs, are thinking about this. Do these guys think about ESG criteria? Have they thought about the societal impact for what they're doing? When we see this theme, and actually I think in the Nordics, this is particularly strong, and we do think about this a lot. However, it's also mainly important for us to have this go hand in hand with financial sustainability. So if you look in the software space, I mean, the old models, right, were one-off licenses. Not really a sustainable revenue model, right? I mean, compared to the SaaS models that we have today, the subscription models, where you have a lot of visibility, great capital efficiency, great for the investors and for the entrepreneurs. So that's more of a sustainable revenue model, if you want to talk about that. We talked about that on growth, scalability, making sure that you have, by the way, before you talk to the Series A investors, making sure you've thought about the potential for scaling this internationally. What's your plan for the UK? What's your plan for Germany? Whatever your next market in Europe might be. And then what's your plan for the US? We do ask those questions further down in the diligence round. It would be important. And we've spoken about this as well, capital efficiency. Actually, this trend of like the funds becoming bigger and bigger, having to put bigger checks into their companies has destroyed so many businesses. It's super unhealthy, And for you guys to focus on building that really bootstrapped, and I know it's incredibly hard, of course it is, but building that bootstrap culture where you make sure that you raise the right amount of capital at the right time, I think is very, very important. And VCs will look at that. How far have you gotten metric-wise with the capital that you raised today? So another key point and part about VCs.
If the company raises more than it should for that stage, could it hurt the company?
It could, yeah, and in many cases it has. Because what happens is if you have too much money, you might not actually think that you need to really focus on spending this at the right marketing initiatives, right? Am I using this in the wrong places? And that could easily be, and then, hey, maybe you'll then find, okay, I have all this money, let's go and expand big time in the US before you're really even ready for it. You know, you've thrown all this money at a sales and marketing team, right? And maybe that was the wrong team. And suddenly you come back, this has happened a lot, by the way, you come back 6 months later, and wow, you haven't even moved number-wise, what's happening here? Well, actually, the whole team and the initiative within the US, we just burned a couple of million, but, you know, we weren't able to make it work. So, you know, you really have to think about this and raising the right amount of capital at the right time.
What we see sometimes, unfortunately is often, and what I'm going to say is going to sound a bit arrogant, I must say, is that sometimes they actually don't fundraise the money they should, and then they just top it up with these grants, European grants and local grants, that have these strings attached, both in terms of setting up a bigger team than they actually needed. They would have to deliver milestones that were not in the original plan. And what we see, and I like your insights on that as well, is that is it often that this side funding, even though it's cheap funding, you think it also can defocus the team and you can actually be less capital efficient because you're getting this new, different source of funding. You know, you probably got funded less than you should with your VC, but then you just stop picking it up with other stuff that it's very demanding in terms of paperwork, it's very demanding in terms of you actually need to have that team, that big size, so that they will just finance a portion of it. Do you think that that's reasonable for a early stage company? Or is it true?
Yeah, but
I think it's grants can be a distraction in terms of getting them.
I think
But as an investor, but it's free money.
yeah.
It's not dilutive.
I think it's almost happens the other way around before the Series A. And what I noticed about European startups is they've often had a couple of million of some kind of grants and they haven't reached any metrics at all. And then that's quite a difficult situation to explain. You know how you burnt through 2 million and still only really a seed level startup.
If the milestones match, I would say so. But if the milestones, and I've seen a few, that the milestones for the grants are just very from money.
If it comes with...
If you do the investment, and if you hire that kind of team, and if you do this, if you do that, sometimes there's a mismatch between those goals and those milestones and the milestones you were expecting.
And I'd be careful if it came with certain contingencies, right? You have to do this and this, because then that could obviously limit the company a little bit in following. So I would definitely be careful. But some of those grants do actually come with those things. But, you know, it requires focus from the team, for sure. I mean, no matter actually where your money comes from, picking out certain core markets that you're going to focus on initially, and they will make your first commercialization. That is very important, because so many times we see these guys with amazing tech, and there's so many use cases, and they have all these ideas, but you know, really, we want to understand what one or two target groups are you going to go after first, and how are you going to make money on them. We like to understand that, and really, when you're talking to investors, having that really arrow focus, I think is really key.
That's a good thing about lean, to be honest. It focuses the mind, and you keep on hitting those milestones of MVP, product market fit, and all the rest of it. The problem is if you have a load of money up front and you go abroad, you're really not following lean at all. You're just doing a whole bunch of experiments which you can't really measure, basically.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, so good question for you. So if you think back to the investor conversations you've had with founders over the last 10 years, outside of this more objective stuff about the pitch deck and the company, what are the sort of behaviors that founders have exhibited to it that have really impressed you and made you want to work with them?
Yeah. So for my appetite to be sort of interest to be piqued, I think it's a combination of a few things. So one thing, I have to just say this first, one thing is obviously personality match with the investors. I mean, I think it's huge. You're going to be married to these guys for a while, right? You have to have a fit personality-wise. And I'll answer for me personally.
Sure.
So I like people who are very driven, who are passionate. And you can tell that they can create that passion just by talking to you. And I find that when I talk to some of the smartest technologists at very early stage, let's say through the TTOs, maybe that's missing a little bit. It can be solved by bringing in the right kind of leadership into the team, and we have done that several times before, and those guys are perfectly fine taking a CTO position. But again, so personality-wise, that kind of charisma and drive, that fire, combined with real structure around explaining their product and me understanding, wow, this is a huge problem. And here's these guys who've invented this really clear way of solving it. So passion combined with structure around delivering the pitch, which is really just explaining their product, right, and their team, has been really impresses me. And there's so many cases where they come in. I mean, this it's surprising even in the UK, which is such an advanced market. They come in and it's all over the place. It's like just make sure that you're really clear and concise. And again, for me, actually, what excites me is that something is deep from a technology standpoint, because that's obviously what I'm more B2B than B2C. So actually seeing something that where I noticed that, okay, there's some super bright PhDs that have worked on this for a couple of years. It's deep technology. I know it's defendable. They started working on some patents, and they're really, again, addressing a real unmet need. Disrupting a market where technology really hasn't had a big impact yet. So I would say a combination of those teams that can deliver that story and talk about their product in a concise way, and the product is that exciting, and it's defendable. You have that package, and I'm pretty happy. But again, we're meeting a lot of companies before we find ones that we invest in. So I think it's something like 2,000 to 3,000 companies a year. It wasn't not at least in the UK, where you have a big deal flow compared to maybe Norway or Sweden, which is a little less. But yeah, combination of liking the people and the product for sure.
Yeah, so let's just say that one of the biggest things we all suffer from is really some kind of bias towards people who we think we like. So although I agree, it is like a marriage, so you have to like them. I think you also then have to educate yourself to be much more inclusive of the people who you do like. I found that I was really bad at this in the past. You tend to get attracted with founders to people who are very self-confident, but often that often translates into being arrogant or just having had the right education system, etc., etc. So I think more and more I'm just trying to learn to be more open-minded about different types of founders, and it's really difficult actually to do that.
That's a really good point as well. You have to make yourself like that for sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why do you need to like your partners? Your LPs don't pay you like it.
Sorry, say that again.
Why do you need to like your partners? Why do you need to like the people that you want to invest in? Your LPs don't pay you like it.
Oh, why I need to like them?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a good question actually.
Let me rephrase it. Your LPs pay you to make money.
Yeah.
If you make money, they will make money. They couldn't care whether you like them.
No, I understand that they don't care, but I think that for us to make money together and for me to be able to help them, it's incredibly important that we work together well. I mean, I work in companies where literally they do not want to produce or send any materials. I mean, they're just like, no, we don't want to send you our latest numbers. We're like, well, actually, it's an obligation that you have towards your shareholders to report. And that kind of conflict, where you just can't work together anymore, is incredibly disruptive for the growth of the business. One, how can we help the company if we don't know how the challenges that they're facing right now, and how can we use our network to help you guys if we can't work together well? And I think everyone in this room has worked in teams that has been dysfunctional. How difficult is it then to create success if you can't work with someone well? So I think actually, if you just pass the capital, yeah, sure, maybe it doesn't matter at all. But actually, we're very engaged in the companies. We want to try to add a lot of value. So working together with the founders is important for us. And I think we spoke about this, but if there's a company that comes to me and I say, actually, this is interesting, but I don't think we can add a lot of value from our fund, it's not our specialty, we'll actually pick up the phone and call one of the other guys at one of the other funds in Europe, say particularly in London, where my network is, say, hey, actually, you know, whether it's Python or Connect or Index or Excel, whatever, and say, hey, we actually found this really exciting company. I don't know too much about it. It's not in my area of expertise. This is something that you'd like to look at. So the right kind of company ends up with the right investors, and making sure that you have a relationship that works is important for growth, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it's all obviously very much over. It's a relationship. It's not trying to stand and kick the shit out of the entrepreneur the first time you're saying it. You've got to believe that you can live with something.
The question is what Paul was asking, which is, how do you know in that dance that they could be unlikable, but they will work with you because they will interest aligned? How do you make that? That's where the catch comes. The truth is the nicest people who are very investable at the end you find them.
The truth is that you make so many mistakes on this. Yeah. Like I've been there several times where literally you thought you backed an incredible team, they made an incredible impression, and then you turn around and then the most amazing things happen. I'll share something without sharing names, but we had a founder that we thought was great, and 2 years in, he has a sex change, and his whole mentality and everything just falls apart, and suddenly he went from being Carl to being Clara, or something like that. And then you have this, these crazy things that could happen. I mean, that's pretty out there, but just an example of how,
Just cognitive bias.
Huh?
It's not just cognitive bias.
Cognitive bias? Well, they couldn't handle it. But I really think that it's hard, it's incredibly hard to make sure in any way that you make the right thing. So ultimately, what can you do? Well, you just apply your psychology and gut feeling, and you do reference checks, talk to people, check their background, do as much as you can. I mean, but yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things we do as investors.
Yeah, maybe one thing I'd like to add on that is startups especially are really counterintuitive. Like when you're choosing features or you're analyzing businesses, it's often your instinct is completely wrong. I often try and really repress when I think about products, what I think will work. I've done it enough times to know I really can't predict that. But one of the things I think you can do is trust your instincts with people. And founders can have sharp elbows. They're the kind of people who do go against the system. They want to do it their own way. If you look at the great founders, they've all had a lot of conflict, like look at Travis, you look at Mark Zuckerberg, etc. But I do think there is something, if you've got a feeling there's something wrong here, like I don't trust this person, even if the business is good, I think that's the one area of business you can trust is your instincts.
I think that's why you would like to put integrity right up there.
Yeah.
I would also say the same thing. If you have any elements of doubt about integrity, then you
absolutely. So if the story isn't adding up, they seem good, but that's going to trigger off some sort of, hey, there's something wrong here. And I think you should pay attention to that.
Absolutely. And actually, it was interesting that you mentioned this, because I was doing a podcast the other day, and he asked this one question, which was, what do you wish sort of you had known when you started out? I thought it was a good question. Actually, the first thing was never to compromise on integrity and quality and qualifications of the team. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it's actually that important. So I completely agree. And I would actually say this is why it's so good that we have a slightly longer DD process and why it's so detailed, because we actually get to spend a lot of time working with the founders in that period, maybe 2 to 3 months, right? I really get to know how I can work with them, because we're sharing information back and forth, I'm asking for stuff, and then we work on that together, and we have many meetings. So actually we do spend a lot of time getting to know the founders, and on that point again, meeting them before they're ready is another thing that we really appreciate. So getting to know them for a while is part of that whole diligence. So actually, really good point. Yeah. Okay, so just why am I having this slightly unrelated slide on board composition. It's just because I do tend to get this question as well quite often, and maybe you already know this, guys, but I just want to say that pre-seed, typically just the two members on the board. Again, going into seed, maybe the angel investor wants a position on the board here, and then at the Series A, which is the important part here, is that you don't have a board that's too investor leaning. That's the only advice I would give. Again, here making sure really, it's the two co-founders again, one being the CEO and the angel and the Series A investor. This independent here is the key part. I mean, if he's really too much on board with the VC, it's just something to think about. Then you're going to have an investor leaning board, and it might not be in your best interest. So just something to think about. But I do get this question a bit, so just wanted to add it in there. I'm not going to spend time on this. We talked about this before. I'm just saying here the things that we add value, the way that we add value to businesses. I don't know what's going on here, but certainly missed the line a little bit. We help with recruiting. We help with opening doors to new partners, new customers. This is something we do on a day-to-day basis, pretty much. Trying to use the portfolio to cross-introduce. It's huge here. And then again, helping with operational efficiency, governance, financing, of course, new financing rounds, introducing to new investors. And this one, last but not least, around international expansion. It's actually one of the most important things that we help with. Everything from logistics to actually all these things above here. When you're entering into the US or new part of Europe, helping, opening up to new customers, making those introductions, helping with recruiting of the sales and marketing team, etc. So this one is big for us, particularly in Signal. And again, and then just making sure when you're talking to investors that you know that they can help your business.